All right. So someone this week asked me, what is your McKinsey method of hosting retreats? Because I host retreats upwards of 2 to 3 times a year. Clearly, I have a formula around it. So would I be willing to share what that formula is? Now, McKinsey, if you don't know the name, is the gold standard of management consulting. And they use a framework called the MEIS framework. ME stands for mutually exclusive. So in other words, I'm not sharing information that overlaps. And the CE stands for collectively exhaustive. So that means that no detail is left unturned. So here is my McKinsey method for how I host retreats. I'll break it into sections. There's going to be before the retreat, during the retreat, and after the retreat. Before the retreat, I'm doing a ton of reading. I subscribe to Condé Nast Traveler, Afar, Away. I mean, there's so many different newsletters that land in my inbox that I'm constantly reading all year round to decide where might I want to host my retreat. I always plan a year in advance. So for example, I'm in Corfu, Greece now, but I booked some of the details around this retreat in June of 2024 when I was on my flight back from my last retreat in the south of France. Some of the criteria that I use to decide where I'm going to do my retreat, how far is something from the airport? In this case, I had a villa here in Corfu, so I had to make sure that the villa was no more than 15 minutes from the airport for transporting people back and forth. How far am I from a hospital? How far am I from amenities? How far am I from excursions? How easy is it for me to get transportation to those excursions? My philosophy around my retreats is that I'm encouraging my clients to do a big thing by taking a big stage and doing keynote on that stage. And so the first time that I push her out of her comfort zone cannot be minutes before she takes the stage, not minutes before she goes to dress rehearsal. I am pushing her out of her comfort zone continuously throughout the year. And this retreat is a little bit hard to get to, probably not a place you would naturally go, but is in service of pushing her out of her comfort zone. One of the things I do before I book a retreat is to find my operating headquarters. Yes, I might be doing it in a city. Yes, I might be doing it at a villa. Maybe I'm doing it on a boat, but I need to have a central base from which I'm going to be operating. So the first step is typically booking my Airbnb or apartment where I'm going to be staying for upwards of a month to 45 days. The next step is to create the operational network. So when I decided last year that Corfu, Greece was the Greek island where I was going to host my retreat, I needed to start networking to understand who was going to be my contact on the ground that was going to help me figure out excursions, transportation, the sacred space where everyone's going to be doing their writing and their deep reflecting, so on and so forth. So I start to socialize to anyone and everyone I know about the retreat and location for next year and say, hey, do you know anybody in Corfu, Greece? And that is how I found the villa that I ultimately booked for this past year. The next step is to find the sacred space. I am taking my clients very deep. I am asking them to harvest deeply personal stories that maybe they've never shared out loud before. Maybe their mom doesn't even know it. And so there's going to be tears, there's going to be vulnerability, and I need to make sure that we are going to a space that is exclusively ours and is like a comfy cocoon so that people feel safe enough to be able to do that kind of a deep share. So for example, 3 years ago, my clients and I were outside of Marrakesh in the Agave Desert. 2 years ago, we were at a villa in Tuscany that was easily an hour outside of Florence, but it was just olive groves around us and nothing else. And so this year, for example, we were at a villa that was 15 minutes outside of town, but 15 minutes from the airport. The final step is to hire a drone operator or a photographer. Look, if I'm going to spend a year planning a retreat, I want to make sure that I have it filmed professionally. So A, I'm in the photos, and B, these become marketing assets for the next year. All right, so now we're moving into the section called during the retreat. During the retreat, I make sure that I arrive at least a week earlier so I can do quality assurance, do the photos, match reality, and if not, do I have time to be able to fix or course correct? I also make a landing page every single time I take a group on a trip, and on that landing page is point-to-point, minute-to-minute, sometimes hour-by-hour breakdowns of what we're going to be doing. Everyone's flight arrival times, departure times, so on and so forth. So part of the reason that I arrive early is to make sure that I am meeting with my contact on the ground to go over everything point to point to make sure that everything still stands or has something actually fundamentally changed. While everyone is on the ground and here with me on the retreat, I make sure that I am completely present. That means I'm not out swimming, I'm not out, you know, in the pool. I am very responsible and responsive. I'm connected to my phone, I'm connected to WhatsApp, and I'm constantly in conversation with the folks who are providing transportation, the folks providing food, the folks who are providing us photographic services, on and on and on. I know that I have time built in afterwards for me to do all the enjoyment stuff, but while I'm hosting people on the retreat, I'm completely present. One of the ways that I create magic on a retreat is to create immersions. So, for example, on this retreat in Corfu, we went up to a Byzantine castle that wasn't the easiest of climbs. It was a very hot day. But again, I'm taking my clients outside of their comfort zone. And once we got up to the fortress, once we got up to the castle, we learned that this was a fortification that was really key to who entered the Adriatic Sea hundreds of years ago. And so we had a conversation about how we were going to fortify ourselves, protect our energy as we were getting ready to do hard things, i.e., a big top on stage. So there's always a metaphor for the immersions that I'm creating. This is also an opportunity for us to bond before we hit our goals. I know that I need to keep everybody on time. I need to make sure that in this case, we figured out what our personal stories were, what our unique frameworks were, and what is universal about any of those ideas that a seamstress, an actress, a SaaS product manager, anybody would be able to take something actionable away from that talk, even if they're not in your swim lane. Creating a vid of magic. I learned this from an old coach named Gabriella years ago, that you had to be live with her in the container in order to experience the magic. It wasn't something that you could just read a book or see a video afterwards. You had to be in it with her live to experience that level of magic. So how do I infuse magic into my retreats? Well, a lot of times the venue does half of the work for me. When we were out in the middle of the Adelphi Desert, or when we were at a villa in Tuscany, half of that work is done just by sheer choice of the location. You know, I am often pulling out some traumatic stories that are hard for a client to share, but this is the clay. This gives me clay to work with as we are trying to create the final sculpture. We can peel away layers so the client doesn't feel like she is, you know, feeling naked on stage because she's revealed too much. But at least I need to know and have all the cards on the table to be able to figure out what it is that we can pick and choose. I can see the dots very quickly, but I kind of need everything to be laid out on the table to understand the buffet that I'm choosing from and she's choosing from when it comes to stories. After the retreat, I debrief with my coach. Inevitably, there are tough personalities that I'm dealing with. Maybe there's unprecedented things I had to deal with. And so it's good for me to sit with my coach and just go back over the blind spots and figure out the talk track if some of the clients were particularly challenging. The other thing is that, and I learned this as a young coach, that if I'm going to take people very, very deep, people are a little bit lost out at sea after all of that discovery. So I need to do something called integration, which means, okay, we've discovered all of this stuff, but what meaning does it have in everyone's everyday life? How does that narrative that we just uncovered, what does integration mean? It could be what are the next steps in their writing to develop the content that we uncovered. It could be creating a retreat recap, which means there's a document with key photos, journaling themes, and how they're going to continue and develop their framework. I host office hours so that we can reflect back on the discoveries that we made. We start to assemble a story library that they can choose from. I'll do a handwritten note and say, you know, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your bravery. And thank you for, you know, being so open and honest while we were on the retreat. That creates a little bit of magic. And then, of course, I said that I hired a photographer, so I'll create a private drive where everybody can go back and revisit moments from the trip. I had to pay everyone here on the ground in Corfu. I had multiple stakeholders, the chef, the sommelier, the transportation, housekeeping. So I need to make sure that all of the international bank details are available to my team so I can pay everybody out. And then the final flourish is to immerse in the culture. I remember when I hosted my first retreat in 2014, it was in Florence, Italy, and the minute that everybody left, I left too, but I don't do that anymore. I stay behind because I want to be able to create a space that I can live and work from long after my clients are done. I want to immerse in the culture that I worked so hard to create for a year. In the book Die with Zero, the author Bill Perkins shares something called the memory dividend. So, in other words, we all know what financial dividends are, right? That's something that you get from your investment. I made an investment in coming to this space, but I love the memory dividends that come back to me again and again from the time that I spend here immersing and doing slow travel. Thing that I'm doing while I'm here in Corfu and having this sort of bleed over time from after my clients leave is that I am planning next year's retreat. Again, I've been reading all year. I'm thinking about Valencia or Sevilla, Spain, but now this whole cycle starts again. Hey, my name is Joya. I'm a former TV anchor and I'm helping senior women business leaders do some raw and honest storytelling so they can access the magic and opportunity that I've been able to access by doing raw and honest storytelling. They can access it too. So if you'd like to work with me, the wait list is open for my mastermind for 2026. All you got to do is click on the link down below and you can apply. I would love to have a conversation with how I can invite you into this wonderful experience for next year.